Morning, everyone, and welcome to Keep Up with Pryme. Today, the edition for accounting firms. In case we haven't met before, I'm Laura Andradas. I'm marketing lead at Pryme Global, and joining me is Aski Holst, product manager at Pryme Global. We'll see each other at the end of the webinar for the Q&A. So please use the chat to drop your questions as we go. And without any further delay, let's get started. So Aske, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So today we are doing the accounting edition of our webinar. This is a slight change from what we've done in the past. We have switched over to a new release cycle for our Pryme Apps. We are now doing 4 major releases every year in February, May, August, and November. And in between those, we will do minor releases where there are only smaller changes, bugs to be fixed, fit and finish, but there should be no breaking changes. With this change, we are also changing our structure of the webinars, so there will be 4 webinars every year to coincide with the major releases. Each of these webinars will be for a specific vertical, and this time we're looking at the accounting firms version. This also means that we will not cover all new functionality that we're releasing across all our apps, but each vertical webinar will be focused on the features and functionality that we deem to be relevant for that specific vertical. For this For this webinar, we will be looking at a number of new features and changes across the process of working with a matter. We are structuring this out as we usually do it when we look at the matter lifecycle, with a setup phase, a planning phase, a work phase, and a pay and get paid or invoicing phase. And in each of these areas, we have new features and functionalities. We will start in the setup areas where we have new features for pricing of resources. We have expenses where we can now create expense templates, and we can also do some other changes to the expense markups. So this is relevant when you have either pricing for resource time or pricing for expenses. Let's jump into a demo. So in my environment, I have already enabled this new pricing for resources, but it is not turned on by default. It must be turned on actively, and until it's turned on, everything will be working as it has in the past. There are 2 steps to turning this on. Both are covered under feature management, but there are 2 different feature managements in Business Central if you're using Pryme Matters. There is feature management, which is Business Central feature management, and then there is the progressive feature management, which controls the features of Advanced Project, which is a part of Pryme Matters. In feature management, it is required to turn on the feature for new sales price experience. This will automatically be turned on from next year anyway, but this is only a prerequisite. Turning this on will change the pricing principles for items sold. And this has been like that for a couple of years. There's no change here, but it is also a prerequisite for the new resource pricing experience. In order to actually activate it for resource pricing, we will need to open the progressive feature management, and there will be a feature update for new sales price experience for resources. And if you turn this on, you will have the new pricing model for resources. It does say here that this will be turned on from the fall of 2026. That is a mistake. There is no plan to automatically turn this on. The old pricing model will live on for what we know, all the future. Not saying it will exist forever, but there's no plan to deprecate it because it does have a number of features that are not present in the Microsoft standard pricing experience for resources. So you can disregard this message about the automatically enabled from. With this turned on, the resource pricing model changes. You can still look at the old resource prices. They are not converted. That is an important part. They will still show up under progressive resource prices, but they will not be used. So these were my old resource prices, but I'm not actively using these because I've now turned on the new pricing experience, but I can use these for reference when I'm setting up the new resource prices. So why would I turn this on? What is the difference? Well, the major difference is that in the progressive resource prices, there is no way to set a price by the client or a group of clients. The pricing can be set by matter, by task, by work type, by currency, by who does the work, by resource group, etc. But there's no concept of a client. That exists in the Business Central resource pricing model. Conversely, there are things you cannot do with the Business Central resource pricing. Mainly, you cannot use pricing by resource subgroup. And there are some other differences in how prices are selected. With the progressive resource prices, the most specific price is chosen first. With the Business Central resource pricing, the lowest price is selected. And that can make a big difference. If you have a general rate of, in this case, 175, but there is a specific rate for a certain matter that might be 185, so it's higher than the general price, then in the Business Central model, it would still give you the lower rate because it always gives what they call the best price. So it is not a drop-in replacement, but it is an option for some companies where it fits better. And the actual resource prices can be set up using the pricing functionality that can be found on from the resource list, for instance, where you can look at sales prices and you can set up price lists. This is one of the advantages. And you can set up multiple price lists. You can manage them. You can work with statuses, etc. And here we can say, I have some prices set up. And actually, this was a bit of a strange list because my prices are set to 0. So I'll put some prices on here just so we have them. And then I should verify the lines to make sure that the price is right. So it's quite similar, but one of the differences again is there is no concept of a resource subgroup in here. And again, the best price principle also applies. So don't just switch over if you're already using the progressive resource pricing. Consider if it is why you would make that change. But for some, it does make sense. The second change in areas of pricing is expense pricing, where we have some new functionality. With resources, we were able to, at least as long as you're using the progressive resource pricing, you could set up resource price templates. Now you can also create expense price templates. And the expense price templates can then be applied to different projects. And in my case, I have different markups of different kinds of expenses. And now I have a standard setup that I can apply to different projects, just like I would with resource prices. So this can make it a lot easier if you have standard rules for how to mark up your expenses on different matters. These can also be included in your matter templates. So there is a field on the matter template for selecting which expense template to use, and the same for importing matters as well. So that was the setup part. Moving over to the plan phase. There we have a whole new app with additional functionality for planning and tracking work. It is not installed by default with Pryme Matters, but if you have our new accounting industry package, you will get this included in the license. Otherwise, it is available as an a la carte add-on purchase. The Pryme Project Work is a new offering where we try to make it easier to track all the work being done. So this will give you a single source of truth. Often work is tracked in an outside system, and then you need to integrate that, keeping track of what are the different projects, what are the statuses. You need to be working in multiple environments at the same time. You can have duplicates. It's not a nice experience. Here we're trying to pull some of that into Business Central, so you have a single place to work and it's always up to date. So you get that visibility into how we are performing, are we doing the work, how much do I have to do ahead of me? And you can look across your matters and see how much have we outstanding, are we on track, etc. It also will allow you to make it easier to track your time, because you can now track it directly to what we call a work item, instead of having to know what the project number is and the task number is, etc. So let's have a look at it. Where we start is on a matter. And so if I open up one of my matters, I will see here that I have a regular matter plan. I have some different tasks. In this case, it is a very generic list of matters, little matter tasks. They are not specified out as what kind of work they are. They definitely could be. And the new thing is here I have work items, not started work items, in progress work items, and completed work items. So I can track here that I have one in progress work item on this matter. I can open this up and see that this is a review for a contract extension. It has someone assigned to do the work. There could be a start date. There could also be a due date. If it is completed, there would be a completion date. And of course, there is information about what project and task and customer it is. We're also tracking the progress, and that is how we place it in the different columns. And we can do that in even more detail with what we call stages. I'll come to that in just a second. And here I can create new work items as well. So I could create a new work item, and I can create that either from scratch or using a template. So if I select a template, I could select a payroll template, for instance. Now, this is a task for doing payroll. And we can see that there is not only a title on this saying payroll, but there's also a checklist of things to be done. This is part of the tracking, that we ensure that everybody is actually doing all the different steps and they are marking them as being completed as you go. I can then assign it to someone. In this case, I will assign it to myself. I'm Prakash in this situation. I might put a start date on it. So let's start this with next year, saying on the 20th of next year, and I should be done with this maybe at the end of that week, also in January. So this is payroll for January. But maybe this is something that should be recurring. I'll be doing payroll every month. So this template actually included a recurrence pattern saying this should be recurring monthly. In this case, it's starting on the 20th of January. So I can select to calculate recurrences. And by calculating recurrences, I get my first recurrence here. And I can change this because I haven't said how far out I want to go. Maybe I would like to do this until the end of the year. Probably that should have been in my original template, so until the end of the year. And so I can recalculate that. Now I have 12 recurrences. So I have monthly payroll as a task. So this makes it a lot easier to work with. And now I can work with these. I get them assigned. I get them on my timeline. The timeline I get is each individual will now in their role center have a list of things to do. I have maybe something that is overdue, something starting today, something starting soon. That's something that should have been done today, something that should be done soon, etc. So I have this whole list of things to work on, and I can always track that I'm doing the right thing. I can also look at the work we have on a bigger scale. I can look at a Kanban board to see what do we have as work ready to do. We can see in here that there is some KYC checks, some review of contract extension, and these are now grouped by different stages. And I can move things along. So when this is completed in the way that I've done all my work, but it is now ready for review, I could move this over into review. And now I know it is in review. When everything is done, I could move it into done. But I should not move it into done because I can see I'm probably not really done. Down here it says 1 out of 3. That's because there is a checklist on this one. And this checklist is not completed. So I should not move this to done. Technically I can, but it will ask me if I really want to do that. So if I want to move this to done, it will say the checklist is not complete. Do you still want to mark this as complete? And I can say yes or no. In this case, if I say yes, well, it will mark it as done. And now it moves over to the done column. I could also just have dragged it. That would have been the same thing. I can structure this Kanban in different ways. So I can show it by who it is assigned to. So something is assigned to Claire, something is assigned to David, the subcontractor, some things are work for Prakash. I could also do it by projects. I could do it by customer. Different ways of looking at it. Even the columns can be switched around in different ways. So I could look at it not by stage, by progress. Here I only have 4 stages, but if you have 9 stages, it might be nicer just to look at the progress. Is it not started, in progress, or completed? I could also look at it by date, either due date, so what's overdue today, tomorrow, next week, this week, later, etc., or by the start date. So there's a lot of different options to view this to get an idea of where we're at. And this Kanban board can be opened from anywhere. It can be open for a project, so you're only looking at a single project. It can be open for a resource, and you can always use filters on it. So if you want to set a filter, there's some predefined, like my work items, or it could be all the unassigned ones, or you can set your own filter just like you would in any other Business Central page. So you can set a filter on anything and say, I would only see the things that are for, let's say, this project, for instance. Then you just get the things for this one project. So this should make things a lot easier. With this in place, I can also use it for time tracking. So if I'm entering time, either directly on a timesheet or using the tracker, I now have the work item as something to select. So instead of having to find my matter and my task, I can look at my work items and I could say, well, payroll, that's what I'm working on. And then that populates with the correct matter and the correct task automatically for me. It will not show all the work items. You can see in here that it only suggested me 2 work items. And that's because it will only show the things that you have actually started and things that have recently been completed or not completed. But if I completed something last week, then I don't get it as a suggestion that I worked on this week, of course. So we're trying to keep that list short and sweet. So that should make it a lot easier to track time as well. So that was the Pryme Project Work. Again, new app, new opportunities. Have a look, try it out, and feel free to reach out and talk to me, ask some questions if there's something you would like to know about it. Back to our overview. We've now looked at what was new in the plan phase, and we're switching to the work phase. We already touched a little bit on the time tracking, that you can now do time tracking on work items, but we have more in this area. With some of the updates that came earlier in late summer, early fall, we now have the ability to track time on Teams calls, and we also have our Copilot features for completing your timesheet. The tracking times on Teams calls is available in both the time tracking entries, but also the calendar. I will show it in the calendar where I can show I can show the Teams calls that I have had. And here I can see that it shows up with the different calls I had yesterday and earlier today. Of course, it cannot show Teams calls in the future because I have not had those calls. But I had a call earlier today with David, and I can add that to my time tracking if I forgot to track my time on this. This is similar to how we already had the capability to show my Outlook calendar. But in truth, the Outlook calendar is what was planned. The Teams calls is what really happened. So looking at today, we can see that I had a planned call for half an hour with David, but in reality, it was 37 minutes. So it is more exact to use the Teams calls as a reference than my calendar appointment. Of course, I can still make changes. I can make it shorter, I can make it longer, and I can make any kind of change on it, but it's a new opportunity to get that. The next thing is the Copilot feature, complete your timesheet, where it will try to fill in the gaps you have. Now, I have too little in my calendar for this to make sense, so I will switch to something else where I have a demo of this from elsewhere. Here I have a timesheet where I have a lot of gaps already in my timesheet, so there's definitely something to fill in. And here I can use the Copilot feature to suggest me something. It will search through my calendar appointments, my Teams calls, my emails I've sent, the emails I received. It will look at the time I have already tracked, trying to identify what could fit in the gaps that I might have missed out. That could be emails I sent, it could be something else. And it's trying to propose something that is a bit intelligent and also give an explanation of why it thought this would be a good idea. So it gives a list, but it's actually easier just to click keep it, and then it will show up in here. Then I can hover over each of these and I get a description of why it added it. In this case, it was an email that was sent at 10:35 and it estimated that to take 18 minutes. And then it added as a suggestion, and then I can create and update my time sheets. So with that, I think there's a lot of possibilities. Of course, it is not 100% truthful. It is an estimation, it is a suggestion. You need to review and see if this is actually fitting with something you actually forgot. Also, we do not allow it to create a timesheet out of nothing. It can only be used if you have already tracked some time on a day. It will not start from zero because that's not what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to fill in the gaps. in the time tracking. So that was a bit on some of the Pryme Time features. There are some additional changes in the work area. One of those is for reopening timesheets. If you're reopening timesheets, then up until now, when you submitted that timesheet again, it would reverse all the entries that were created and create new entries instead. And that was kind of a safe way to go. That way you are sure that everything that you reopened was reverted and you got new entries. On the flip side, it also meant that if you're only changing a few things on the timesheet, then that was a lot of extra entries that added no real value. With this new version for November, we are only creating entries where changes have been made. So this should cut down significantly on the number of reversals and new entries related to reopened timesheets. The second change is, and the last on the list here under work, is that we can now have true resource lines on purchases. Functionally, this doesn't change anything, but it does make a difference in at least what a purchase invoice looks like. So if I have a purchase invoice, I can now create lines that have the type of resource and put project and task numbers on them. Previously, if you had something that was resource time, you had to create the line as a GL line and then fill in the resource number fields. So there is no change in the outcome of this. Exactly the same logic for the entries created, for the accounts payable. You can use either way. It's just a little bit more clear that the line now says resource and you don't have to use this special resource number field. You can use the regular number field to select the resource. So nice little thing that makes it a little bit easier. Moving on to the last area, invoicing. And here we usually cover how you get paid, but making sure that others get paid as well is equally important. Well, maybe not equally, but it is also important. And especially subcontractors. If you're working with freelancers, other companies that does part of the work for you on selected matters, it is important to have an easy and efficient process for them getting paid. And for that, we have Pryme Project Subcontracting. The idea here is to streamline the process so the subcontractor will track their time, either directly in Business Central if you give them access to a timesheet there, or they will submit timesheets that you import into Business Central. And based on that, we can then create a subcontractor statement that shows all the time that was approved in the past and have not yet been paid. And then from there, we can either pay them via self-billing, or we can have this as a reference to match up with the invoice they will be sending. So it should make it a better experience both for the subcontractor, but also for whoever is managing this process. There is a lot of time to be saved and a lot of headaches to be avoided. Again, this is included with our Pryme accounting industry package. It is not pre-installed with Pryme Matters. And if you don't have the accounting industry package, it can be bought as an a la carte add-on. Let's have a look at it. So the way this works is that for each of the resources, you can define if they are related to a subcontractor. In this case, we have David, which I've aptly named David Subcontractor. And on his resource card, I've selected a value in the subcontractor vendor number field. In this case, I've selected 20,000, which is first up consultants. This means that all time entries and other entries created for him will be marked with they are related to the first up consultants subcontractor and this first up consultant's subcontractor vendor should be paid for his time and expense. So how does this work in practice? Well, David would submit his timesheets either using the same timesheeting functions that directly employed people would, or you would import via a matter time journal using the import function if he submits an Excel sheet, for instance. And this means there are now matter letter entries for David, the subcontractor. First up consultants who employed him, and maybe that is his own company, he might be a sole proprietor, would like to get paid. And that payment process we can manage with subcontractor statements. So I can create subcontractor statements. I do that for a period of time. Let's say we create that for October, that's last month. And then I get a list of statements. In this case, I got one statement created for first up consultants. But of course, if I had multiple subcontractors, I might get multiple statements. I can then review that statement and see this is the work that he performed, and it is to the value of 1,581. Does that look reasonable? No, actually, that's something he shouldn't get paid for. This piece of work he was never supposed to be doing. He submitted that anyway. I will actually take that out, and so because I don't want to pay him for it. From this, I can say, let's print this out. So I can get a printed statement in, I think it's in December release, or is it later that we planned that you can also automatically email these out? Currently, you will have to email them yourself, but you get a printed statement with all the details of the work that you can send to the subcontract and say, this is what we think you should get paid for. Please send us an invoice for this amount, 1,360. And then you wait. You could also create a self-billing invoice. That depends on whether you have an agreement for self-billing. At least in the UK, you're required to have a self-billing agreement. We will check if there's agreement in place. Some countries, it is not easy to do self-billing, and so you would rather wait for an invoice. But there is an option to create a self-billing invoice. In order to do that, you must first approve it. And now it is marked as approved. And because I'm not creating a self-billing invoice, I would wait for an invoice to come in from first up consultants. Let's see if they've sent in an invoice. Yes, there's an invoice here. Is this the invoice? Well, it's probably that, but it doesn't say so. So I would have hoped that they would have been so kind as to put on the reference number for this subcontract statement on in here, because then we would have it, and by putting it in here, the system will automatically find it. So if you're using an API automation solution like Pryme API automation solution, then it will automatically find references and put them on. This means that they end up here in the subcontractor statement field down below, and here it matched that up and said, well, there is a partial match here. The subcontractor statement says that he should be paid 1,360. He sent an invoice for 1,900. So there's quite a bit of a discrepancy here. There's a 500 in discrepancy. Now we can allow for some tolerance for rounding, etc. But that is, of course, way too much of discrepancy. So here we'll have to have a discussion with them and say, why did you send us an invoice for 1,900 when you didn't provide that work? And maybe they provide a revised invoice and we get a new invoice. This time we might get a new one and say it's for 1,360. And then suddenly it says full match. It's not the exact amount, but we allowed for a bit of discrepancy. And now we have an invoice that we can post. And so we post it, we pay it, all that. And that will also close our subcontractor statement. Now, if I've done my setup correctly, I could have posted it. That will close the subcontractor statement, and the entries on there will not appear the next time we do a run. Last feature of the day is build to customer by task. It is a small but interesting change where on a matter we can now decide to invoice in a different kind of split. In the past, we have had the client split percentage and use client split that allowed you to do splitting on a percentage basis. Say we split the cost 50-50 or 70-30 or 30-30, 40, whatever it is. There is now an option to use billing by multiple clients instead of just one client. If you use this, you can no longer use the splitting, and instead you will define the different tasks on the project with a specific client to be billed for that one specific task. So it's a different kind of splitting. You could say it's more of a horizontal splitting versus the client split, which is maybe kind of a vertical splitting. It is an irreversible process. So if you change a matter to be multiple clients, you cannot change it back. You will get a warning about this, and it will also check if there already are entries in process, because if that's the case, then you cannot make that change. So in this case, I will get an error message when I click yes, because it will tell me that you cannot do this because there are already entries associated with this matter. So it has to be done at the beginning of the matter. You cannot do it afterwards. That's all we had for today. I will end up with a slide showing a quick roadmap for the future. This is not a complete roadmap for everything we will be doing going forward, but it's some high-level changes that I think could be relevant to an accounting practice. For February, we are looking at some better permission sets in general. We are doing some time calendar improvements. Come May, we want to create a time tracking experience outside of BC. What that will look like exactly, I cannot share the details on, but expect some kind of window, a small app that you can run where you don't need the full Business Central UI, and you can quickly start and stop tracking. You can quickly create time entries. And hopefully over time, we can then take that and also put it inside some Microsoft products like maybe Outlook, Teams, maybe even some of the documents. So when you're working on a Excel sheet, potentially you could also track time in there. Come August, we would like to work with the narratives for timesheets, the descriptions. So we hope to introduce a description editor, some policy checking with AI to check that descriptions follow certain policies, but also giving suggestions for changes, also based on more general rules and policies. So that is the focus area for August. I will end up with a slide on with just some quick QR links to our subcontracting and project work apps that I showed today. If you want to check them out, feel free to do so, and also don't hesitate to reach out to me.